morning and happy 4th of July, everybody. I decided to do something a little different today. Doing reactions to music videos has been a little frustrating lately. I currently have 3 videos that are in the appeals process because they have been blocked by YouTube for copyright reasons. It's particularly troubling to me that my reaction to Dax's song, his mega remix of To Be a Man, was blocked. I noticed a number of other people were blocked, but then a whole other group of people were able to react to the song without a problem. I really would like someone to explain to me what that's about. It's almost as if there's an A list of people who are allowed to react and a B list of us second-class citizens who cannot react. That's not the way this country is supposed to work. And speaking of this country and our national holiday today, I thought I would give a little more background on who I am, where I came from, and why I feel the way I do about a lot of the issues of the day. As any regular viewer of the channel has probably become aware, I am very, very conservative politically. By that I mean I'm very much in favor of upholding the rule of law and the Bill of Rights, which are the foundation of the success of this country and are under attack more and more, especially in the last 3 years. I instantly knew in March of 2020 that there was something very, very wrong going on with the fear porn, the lockdowns, and leading into the vaccinations of an untested experimental gene therapy. I've been fighting against that ever since, but especially to the extent that civil liberties were curtailed, and especially our most sacred civil liberties in the First Amendment, the right to free speech and the right to assemble and protest. That really got me upset. Now, why did I care so much about that? Well, I've done a lot of genealogy about my family, and in almost 90% of the lines that I've been able to trace, they all came out of New England and were all part of the Great Migration that brought people from England into New England from 1620 to 1650. I found at least 10 members that were on the Mayflower and many others that came in the succeeding years. It's really the story of the early years of America. Some of them were famous, many more were not, but they all played a role. Many of them fought in every war this country has ever had, including the Indian Wars that occurred in New England early on, the War of 1812, the Civil War, and so forth. My own great-great-great-grandfather on my mother's side was killed at the Battle of the Wilderness, fighting against slavery. Others fought in the Revolutionary War. On my father's side, one of my ancestors was Roger Sherman of Connecticut. He may be the only person who signed our 3 most important founding documents: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. I always carry in my wallet a $2 bill. And I don't know how well you can see this, but I'll put a better picture online. I know the $2 bill is not very common in circulation. Some people think it's unlucky. But if you ever look at the back of a $2 bill, you'll see a picture there of the gentleman presenting the draft. And one of those 4 gentlemen is Roger Sherman. So I do take it personal when people start tearing down the Constitution and saying that the Constitution was written by a bunch of white men and slave owners. I don't believe Roger Sherman ever owned a slave in Connecticut. When you start saying that we need to get rid of certain constitutional rules, I do take it personal. Sherman was known for advancing the Connecticut Compromise. His fear was that small states like Connecticut would be outvoted by the larger states like New York and Virginia and Pennsylvania. So he inserted some protections for the minority, the smaller states. That's why we have a United States Senate where every state has 2 members. I'm sure that California and New York would love to get rid of that provision because it's not exactly democratic. California has 40 or 50 million people and they get 2 senators, where a small state like Wyoming that has only a couple 100,000 also get 2 senators. People don't think that's fair, but without that provision inserted by Roger Sherman, the Great Compromise, we wouldn't have had a country because the smaller states would never have agreed to go into a situation where they could be outvoted and overruled by the larger states. This is a part of American history that I don't even know is even taught anymore. But in any case, I just wanted to get on today and give you a little more of that background of why I feel so strongly about these things. In fact, this is the 2-year anniversary of when I sat down and started drafting my complaint that ended up as a federal lawsuit against the state of New York. 2 years ago, on the 4th of July, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd been through a year of increasingly strict restrictions here in New York State under Governor Cuomo, and he came out with a rule in July of 2021 that people who were not vaccinated, which I never was, would have to wear a mask to go into any business, while those who were vaccinated didn't have to wear a mask. Now, I knew from all my reading what a lot of people didn't understand at the time was the vaccination did not in any way stop you from getting or spreading the disease. They kind of kept that information on the down low, and only those of us who were paying attention knew that. For me, that was the last straw. So on Independence Day 2021, I sat down and I began to draft my complaint. Now, I do have a law degree, and I did practice law briefly in the state of New York from 1981 to 1986. So I wasn't going into it as someone with no knowledge of the law, but I was never any kind of a litigator, and I was certainly never a litigator in federal court. So I had a lot to learn. And I did proceed technically as pro se, which means without representation of counsel, because I have been retired from the practice of law since 1986. So I really wasn't up to speed on anything. I took aim at that particular rule as being a violation of equal protection, that people who were in the same situation, in other words, people who had the same likelihood of catching and spreading the disease, were being treated differently. Didn't seem right to me. Still doesn't. So in any case, the day that I officially filed the lawsuit was the day that Cuomo announced he was stepping down. And shortly after that, I received a phone call from Attorney General's office telling me that the rule that I had been suing about had actually been repealed. They gave me an opportunity to amend my complaint, and I decided to go forward because there was a lot of other regulations that I still did not agree with. Most of all, I was very, very concerned about the spread of what they called the Excelsior Pass, that they were trying to gear up, where your medical records would be put into a card, and that card would be used to exclude you from certain venues. So I redrafted and went after the Excelsior Pass. And then in December of 2021, they came out with even worse regulations than the ones I had originally complained about, more discriminatory against the unvaxxed. So at that point, I filed for an injunction against those new regulations. My case was before a federal judge up in Rochester, who was one of the senior judges, and actually a Ronald Reagan appointee. So I felt I had my best chance with him. But what I discovered, of course, is that judges, like every other person who gets their news from controlled media, are just as susceptible to buying the narrative and not understanding what was really going on. And when you think about it, they were following CDC regulations as far as masking, vaccination. They had bought into the whole fear porn. Rather than answering my complaint, the state put in for a motion to dismiss it in early 2022. And unfortunately, even though the judge was supposed to consider that all of my allegations were true in terms of deciding whether I had stated a case, he could not wrap his head around some of the things that I was saying concerning the damage that the vaccination was doing. And he even said so in his final ruling, where he did dismiss my case. I decided not to appeal that to the Second Circuit, which is based in New York City, because I realized that the judges down there were even less likely to give me a fair hearing. So I let the case drop in the spring of 2022 because, frankly, I didn't want to put any more money into it, and I didn't want to put any more time into it. But I was very happy to hear just a few days ago that finally the state of New York announced that they are dropping the Excelsior Pass. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to develop this technology, but fewer and fewer people were buying into the whole fear porn, and therefore it wasn't being used very much, and so they finally decided to kill it. I'm concerned that it will come back again in some form, maybe even on a federal level. And we know that the European Union is pushing a similar electronic pass for all of their citizens. So the idea is not totally dead, but it's temporarily been shelved, at least in New York. Now, if you want to know more about my lawsuit, I will leave a link to a website that I set up to kind of be a companion to this video channel. It's called 20men.com. I will put the link in the description. I haven't maintained the site much in the last year or so, but I do have pretty much all the legal papers that were filed in the case. I also have a substack where I wrote a number of articles on some of the issues that were in my lawsuit. So I will also leave a link for that. I hope that explains where I'm coming from. Obviously, I do favor music that has a political angle to it, and I will continue to do so, although it's a little frustrating that there is so much censorship going on, that YouTube is really controlling what music gets made, what music gets played, what music people are allowed to react to, what gets said about music, what gets said about issues in general. You might want to check on Rumble. The 3 videos that are currently in review for copyright can be viewed on Rumble, and there's also other content that's been banned from YouTube and content that we never even tried to put on YouTube. If we're going to have true independence and true freedom of expression and free speech, unfortunately, we may have to find alternatives to the controlled media, which includes YouTube. Keep fighting, keep the spirit of independence alive. Happy 4th, everybody.
Holding in the way, that's what I heard them say. They used to heed the words he said.